I didn't ask for a promotion. I didn't demand a corner office. I asked for a 5% raise after 3 years of overtime, weekend work, and missed holidays. 5%. That's what it took for my boss to laugh in my face. The sound of it, his laughter, still echoed in my head as I sat frozen across from him. My hands were clenched in my lap beneath the conference table. I had rehearsed my pitch for days. I'd even printed charts showing the revenue increase from the client accounts I managed. I wore my best blazer and a calm smile, but nothing prepared me for the dismissiveness in his voice. "Melissa," Darren said, leaning back in his chair like he was settling in for entertainment. "If you want more money, get a job elsewhere." He chuckled as if he had made some clever joke. 5%, he muttered again, shaking his head. I smiled politely, though my heart was thudding. "Thank you for your time," I said quietly. I gathered my papers with steady fingers, though inside something broke. Not my confidence. That was long gone. Something deeper. Like the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. I'm Melissa Carter, 32, Senior Account Coordinator at Jennings and Rowe Marketing. And until that moment, I'd always been the kind of employee bosses said they could rely on. I never missed a deadline. Took the messiest clients and made them happy. Stayed late, came in early, never complained. And I'd asked for a raise once. Just once. I walked back to my desk. Not even an office, just a corner space by the copy machine. And stared at my screen. My coffee was cold. My inbox was full. Another project had been dumped on me that morning, because Melissa gets things done. They always said that like it was a compliment. Before I go any further, I want to ask those of you watching, have you ever been in a situation like this, where loyalty felt one-sided? Let me know in the comments. And hit that like button if you've ever stayed too long somewhere that didn't see your worth. It helps more people find this story, because what happened next might help someone else find their voice. That night, I stayed late. Again. Finishing a campaign presentation for a client Darren had forgotten about. When I finally left the building, it was nearly 9 p.m. The parking lot was empty except for the same 3 cars always left behind. Mine, the cleaning crew's, and Darren's. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching the building. The same glass windows I'd looked through every day for 3 years. And I thought about the time I spent trying to prove my worth, as if worth needed to be earned through exhaustion. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened LinkedIn. The message icon had a red notification. I tapped it. "Melissa, if you're ever open to a conversation, we'd love to chat. Your work with Carrington Corp didn't go unnoticed." It was from Emily Saunders, VP of Strategy at Kensington and Wells, our biggest competitor. The message was 2 months old. I stared at it, my finger hovering. Darren's voice echoed. "If you want more money, get a job elsewhere." I replied, "Hi, Emily. Thank you for reaching out. If you're still interested, I'd be happy to have that conversation." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Let's talk tomorrow. I'll call you at noon." I sat back in my car seat, adrenaline rising like I'd done something rebellious. But all I'd done was respond to an offer, an open door. The next morning, I arrived at work at 8:15. Darren walked in at 10:03. He gave me a wink and said, "Still here, Melissa?" "After all that drama?" I smiled back. "Of course, I've got a full day ahead." He didn't know I'd be taking the call that would change everything in 3 hours. I returned to my desk, opened the Carrington file, and started typing the final report I'd promised by Friday. Not because I owed it to him, but because it was mine. My work, my name on every line. At 11:59, I stood up and walked to the empty break room, closed the door, sat down at the small round table where people left forgotten bagels. At 12 o'clock sharp, my phone rang. "Melissa, this is Emily." And just like that, the next chapter of my life began. With one phone call, one open door, one boss's arrogance too blind to see value staring him in the face. I didn't know it yet, but the next 48 hours would reshape everything. "Melissa? This is Emily." Her voice was warm, confident, the kind of voice you instinctively trust. I straightened my posture without realizing it. "Hi, Emily. Thank you for calling. I've followed your work since the Carrington Project," she said. "That campaign changed the game. The targeting logic, the conversion boost. It was surgical." I blinked. Darren had taken full credit for that project. At the client meeting, he hadn't even mentioned my name. I'd done the research, built the framework, ran the A/B tests until the numbers made sense. But the client only knew his. "Thank you," I said carefully. "Let's get to the point," Emily said. "We want you here. You're not just talented, you're underutilized. And I know what that feels like." That last part, "I know what that feels like," hit deeper than I expected. "What's the role?" I asked. "Senior campaign strategist. You'd lead your own team. Salary's 35% higher than your current one, with bonuses, profit sharing, and full creative freedom. We don't micromanage talent here." I had to take a breath. "That's generous." "It's fair," she said firmly. "Fair for what you bring to the table. I already ran it by HR. If you want the job, it's yours. But I need an answer within 24 hours. 24 hours? I was expecting a drawn-out process. Interviews, vetting, negotiations. But they already knew my worth. From the outside. Something my own boss never even cared to learn. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. "Thank you." After I hung up, I didn't move for a long time. Just stared at the break room fridge humming beside me. Somewhere down the hall, Darren was probably cracking jokes over lunch about how needy employees were these days. At 12:30, I returned to my desk and found another task waiting. Urgent, of course. "Can you take care of this?" Darren's email read, "You're the only one I trust to clean up this mess." Funny. Trust me to clean the mess, but not to lead, not to earn more, not to matter. That night I called my mom. She used to work the late shift at a pharmacy while raising me. She understood sacrifice. "You're not seriously thinking about staying, are you?" she asked after I told her about the offer. "I've been at Jennings & Rowe for years. It feels wrong to just leave." "Melissa," she said softly, "wrong is giving your time, your soul to someone who sees you as a tool. You didn't leave. They pushed you." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about how long I'd bent myself in half to make myself small enough to fit into a system that never made space for me. About how many nights I'd worked past midnight just to prove I was good enough. The next morning, I got up early, made fresh coffee, and sent one message. "Emily, I'm in. Let me know the next steps." Her reply came instantly. "Welcome to the team. We'll send over the formal offer and onboarding package by noon." I stared at those words. Welcome to the team. I hadn't heard that since my first day at Jennings & Rowe. And even then, it was said half-heartedly by an overworked receptionist. But now it meant something. At 9 a.m., I walked into the office like any other day, said good morning to reception, sat at my desk, smiled at the people who never noticed when I stayed late or skipped lunch. But inside, I was different. By 10:30, the offer letter was in my inbox. The numbers made my chest tighten. The benefits. The title. The opportunity. I printed the offer, folded it, slipped it into my bag. Then I did something petty. Maybe. Or maybe it was necessary. At 11 o'clock, I asked Darren if he had a moment. He grinned. "Back for round 2? More raise negotiations?" "Not exactly." I handed him the letter. He unfolded it slowly. His grin faded. His eyes scanned the header. "Kensington & Wells. Offer of employment." The color drained from his face. "You're kidding," he said. "I'm not. But they're our biggest competitor, yes." Silence. "You said if I wanted more money, I should find another job," I said, keeping my voice calm. So I did. His mouth opened, then closed. "This is a joke. You won't last there. It's a pressure cooker." "I've worked 60-hour weeks for you for 3 years straight," I said, my voice firmer now. I think I'll manage. He stood up, suddenly agitated. This is betrayal, after everything I've done for you. I looked him in the eye. Everything you've done to me, you mean? Then I smiled. The kind of smile that says I'm finally done explaining myself. Don't worry, Darren, I added. Tomorrow will be my last day, and I'll make sure the transition is unforgettable. I arrived an hour early on my final day, not to be dramatic, not to make a statement, but because I wanted to walk through the office once more. The quiet, untouched version before people arrived. Before the noise, the small talk, the pretense. I had spent over 1,000 days here. Some of them full of pride. Most of them heavy with exhaustion, but today felt weightless. By the time Darren arrived, at 9:57 a.m., latte in hand as usual, I had already cleaned out my desk, packed my mug, my desk calendar, my favorite pen set, the framed photo of my niece from her birthday, the one I missed because of a client emergency. Darren barely looked at me as he walked by. He didn't say good morning, but I saw the tightness in his shoulders. He was unraveling. At 10:30, I sent the company-wide handover email. Short, professional, no drama. Just links to my documentation, organized folders, client notes, and a polite sign-off. Today is my last day. It's been a journey. Wishing everyone the best moving forward. Melissa. By 10:45, the messages started rolling in. From Julie in finance. Wait, you're leaving? What happened? From Kevin in client success. They're going to be in chaos without you. From Emma in creative. Tell me where you're going so I can follow you there. I didn't reply. Not yet. At 11 o'clock, Darren called me into his office. Again. Melissa, he started, forced calm in his voice. I've been thinking. I said nothing. Just looked at him. Maybe we were hasty yesterday. I shouldn't have laughed. That was unprofessional. It took everything in me not to smile. Look, he continued, I've spoken with HR. We can offer a 7% raise. Retroactive to January, I raised an eyebrow. It's a good offer, he added. Fair. Shows how much we value you. You value me now that I've got one foot out the door. I folded my hands. I appreciate the gesture, Darren, but I've already accepted another offer. He frowned. That doesn't have to be final. You haven't even left yet. We can match whatever they're offering. I leaned forward just slightly. Can you match a team that respects me? A manager who credits me for my work? A culture that promotes based on impact, not favoritism? He didn't answer. I'm not just leaving for money, I said quietly. I'm leaving because I was invisible here, until I became a threat. Darren exhaled sharply. If you go, you're burning bridges, Melissa. No, I said, standing. You lit the match the day you laughed at me for asking to be valued. I left his office without another word. It was noon when I got the text from Emily. Just confirming. You're still good to start Monday? Absolutely, I typed back. Let me know what to prep over the weekend. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Actually, you might want to check your email. Thought you'd like to see this. I refreshed my inbox. A forwarded chain from a client I had worked with for months. A big one, Sterling Biotech. A note at the top from Sterling's VP. We're disappointed to hear Melissa is leaving. She was the main reason we stayed with Jennings and Rowe. Please confirm who will be handling our account as we're reconsidering our position. I stared at the screen, pulse racing. Attached was a copy of the email Sterling had sent to Darren. I forwarded it to my personal email and hit save. At 3 o'clock, I was called into HR. They handed me the exit paperwork, the usual forms. Confidentiality, non-disparagement, final paycheck confirmation. Then came the curveball. We'd like you to sign this non-compete, the HR rep said, sliding the last page toward me. I laughed. For the first time all week, I actually laughed. This wasn't in my original contract. I said. We're asking employees to agree to it going forward. Just a formality. I pushed it back across the table. I won't be signing that. But I'm leaving, not dying, and I'm not signing away my right to work. They looked stunned, as if they had never expected a polite, quiet employee like me to say no. At 4:15, I walked to Darren's office one last time, dropped off the company phone. My badge. He didn't say a word. He didn't even look at me, but I could feel the panic radiating off him like heat. I walked out of Jennings and Rowe for the final time at 4:23 p.m. No farewell party. No send-off. Just the quiet knowledge that everything had changed. The next morning would be Darren's to handle alone. Client calls, transition failures, questions he couldn't answer. And I would be nowhere near the fallout. Instead, I'd be walking into Kensington and Wells, with my name on the door, my work recognized, and my worth no longer a question. And that, I thought, was the beginning of something bigger than a raise. Monday morning at 8:30 a.m., I stepped into the sleek, open-floor headquarters of Kensington and Wells, sunlight spilling in through tall glass windows, voices buzzing with energy, and my name already printed on the welcome packet sitting on my new desk. "Welcome to the team, Melissa," the front desk assistant had said, offering me a fresh cup of coffee. "You're going to love it here." And I already did. My new office wasn't huge. It wasn't on a high floor or full of expensive furniture. But it had a door, a window, a quiet space that was mine. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I wasn't just occupying space. I belonged in it. Before I'd even logged into my new email, I saw it. The news. Subject line, Sterling Biotech terminates Jennings and Rowe contract. I clicked. An internal memo had been leaked. Sterling's leadership cited the departure of key personnel as a major reason. My name wasn't mentioned explicitly, but I didn't need it to be. Emily walked into my office just as I finished reading. She raised an eyebrow, holding her phone up. "I take it you've seen the news?" I nodded slowly. That was fast. "Turns out, when you're the glue, everything cracks once you leave." I smiled, but only halfway. "They'll blame me. They'll try," she said. "But the truth is, they let you go long before you walked out the door." I spent the morning meeting my new team. 3 brilliant strategists, 1 intern named Lexi, and a data scientist who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Eager, careful, always waiting for approval. "You don't have to prove anything here," I told her when we sat down to review her first project draft. "If you've got ideas, bring them." She blinked, surprised. "Even if they're different from yours?" "Especially if they are." By 2 p.m., my inbox was flooded with news alerts, LinkedIn messages, and quiet whispers from former colleagues at Jennings and Rowe. From Emma, "Darren's freaking out. Sterling's gone. Now Bioplex is threatening to pull too." From Kevin, "He just called an emergency meeting. You should have seen his face." I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was clarity. This was never about punishing Darren. It was about what happens when a company builds its reputation on people it refuses to see. I didn't have time to dwell, though, because at 3:15, I was called into a leadership meeting with Emily and the executive team. "Melissa," the COO said, "Sterling has asked that you personally oversee the transition. They want continuity, confidence, and you." I blinked. Of course, I'd be honored. And just like that, I became the face of a $4.2 million contract. By Tuesday, the dust hadn't even settled, and yet Jennings and Rowe was hemorrhaging clients. 3 accounts had paused campaigns. 2 had requested exit clauses. I watched it unfold, not with glee, but with a strange sense of inevitability. This is what happens when leadership forgets that loyalty is earned, not owed. That afternoon, I got a message from Julie in finance. HR just announced layoffs. They're starting with account support. "Everyone's blaming you, Melissa." I stared at that message longer than I wanted to admit. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. then finally responded, "I'm sorry they're going through that. But I didn't cause this. They did, when they chose to ignore what their people were worth." I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by a mix of pride and guilt. Pride in my decision. Guilt for the people who were now facing the fallout. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Lexi, about Emma and Kevin, about the people I used to eat lunch with at that sticky cafeteria table while Darren sat in steakhouse boardrooms taking credit for our work. And I thought about the cost of standing up. It wasn't just mine. The next morning, Emily knocked on my door. "I wanted to talk to you about something," she said, sitting down. "We're expecting more resumes from Jennings and Rowe, people looking for a place to land." I figured. "I'd like you to help us review them," she said, "especially for the Sterling team. You know who the strong ones are? Who deserves a second shot." I felt something shift inside me. Power, not for revenge, but for restoration. "I'd be honored," I said. As she stood to leave, she paused. "Oh, and Darren reached out." I blinked. "What?" "He sent a message through the contact form on our site, asked for a meeting, said he'd like to consult for us, share insights about the client landscape." I let out a short breath. "What did you say?" "I said we already have the insight we need." Emily smiled. "Her name is Melissa." 3 weeks after my first day at Kensington and Wells, I stood at the head of the Sterling project team's strategy table, pointing to projected ROI graphs that made even the most skeptical execs lean forward. Every metric had gone up since the transition. Client satisfaction, deliverables met early, new campaign reach. My team delivered. Not because they feared me, but because they were heard, respected, trusted. And for the first time in my life, I was the one guiding the room. Not quietly, not from behind the scenes, but as a name on the report, a face in the pitch. Recognition felt strange, like walking into a new version of yourself you didn't know existed. Still, it came with a weight I hadn't expected, because while my star rose, Jennings and Rowe continued to unravel. By now, the layoffs had reached middle management. Word spread that Bioplex and Marintech had pulled out. Nearly half the office had been let go. The rest were living in constant fear. And my name was still on their lips. One afternoon, I received an email from Emma. She had always been the quietly brilliant designer who never got credit for her best work. "Melissa, they cut my whole team yesterday. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've never worked anywhere else. I just wanted you to know. I'm not mad. You did what we all wish we had the guts to do." That one stung more than I expected. I forwarded her portfolio to Emily. Within 2 days, Emma was being interviewed by our design director. But it wasn't just Emma. Over the following week, I quietly compiled a list of people I used to work with. Ones who stayed late, delivered under pressure, lifted others up even when they weren't lifted themselves. People like Julie, Kevin, Marcia from QA, Antonio in IT. I knew who deserved more, and I knew how to find them. It became a side mission. Every night after work, I combed through LinkedIn profiles. Every lunch break, I opened old Slack messages and client feedback logs. I remembered who made the machine run while Darren played executive. And one by one, I found ways to bring them here. Or at least try. But not everyone wanted to come. Some ignored my messages. Some replied politely with, "Thanks, but I'm not ready to leave the past behind." One message stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. It was from Patrice, former accounting lead. "You got your promotion by watching the house burn after you left. Don't act like a hero now." I saved it in a folder I'd started called The Cost, because that's what it was. The cost of getting what you're worth when the system was built to keep you quiet. A week later, Emily and I presented the Talent Recovery Initiative to the board. It was a formal proposal to prioritize displaced Jennings and Rowe staff in our hiring pipeline. Training programs, referral bonuses, partnership with a career services firm. We'd even offer consulting positions to those nearing retirement or in career transitions. "You're sure this is the right move?" one board member asked. There are former competitors' people. Some might carry bad habits. Emily answered before I could. They were never the problem, she said. They were the solution their leadership failed to see. The board approved it unanimously. By the end of that month, 14 former Jennings and Rowe employees had joined us. Emma was promoted within 2 weeks. Antonio rebuilt our internal comm systems in record time. Kevin designed a new feedback loop that improved client response time by 30%. And the culture? Stronger, humbler, real. One morning, as I walked into the building, I saw a familiar face in the lobby. Darren. He looked like a ghost of himself. Thinner, paler, carrying a worn leather briefcase and a nervous smile. He stood up as I approached. Melissa, he said, voice tight. I'm not here to cause trouble. What are you here for? I asked, keeping my distance. They're saying you're hiring former J&R people. I need work. I've got a family, a mortgage. You know how this industry works. Once your name's attached to failure. He trailed off, waiting. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, I'm not in charge of executive hiring. I'll take anything, he added quickly. Consulting, training, even admin. I looked at the man who once told me I was replaceable, now standing in front of me, asking for a second chance. You said I burned bridges, I reminded him. He looked down. Turns out I was the one holding the matches. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just told him I'd pass along his resume. As I walked away, I realized something important. I didn't need to destroy him to win. He'd done that to himself. I just stopped trying to prove I belonged in a place that never saw me. 6 months had passed since I walked out of Darren's office for the last time. In that time, Jennings and Rowe lost 4 major clients, laid off over 60% of their staff, and quietly pulled out of 2 national campaigns. Rumors circulated about a potential merger. Others whispered about liquidation. I didn't watch with joy. I didn't watch with guilt either. I just observed, detached, like watching a familiar house fall in on itself, knowing you tried to fix the foundation, but no one listened. My life looked very different now. I had an office with a door and a view. A team of people who asked for my input, not my silence. A boss who credited my ideas publicly. A workload that was still heavy, but not thankless. And for the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night. Not from lack of responsibility, but because I no longer carried the weight of being invisible. One morning, I arrived early, before the building filled with footsteps and small talk. I liked the quiet hours best. It reminded me of all those mornings at Jennings and Rowe when I was the first one in and no one noticed. Only now I noticed, and it made all the difference. I made coffee, opened my inbox, reviewed a campaign brief from one of our junior strategists, Lexi. It was sharp, creative, and confident. Her voice was in the work. I made a note to tell her that. No edits, just a well done. Before I closed the file, I saw a line in her footer. Mentored by Melissa Carter. It made me pause. It was the kind of acknowledgement I used to wish for, long ago. At 11 a.m., Emma stopped by my office. They offered me the lead designer role, she said, eyes wide. I grinned. Of course they did. I'm not sure I'm ready. You've been ready for a while. You're just not used to being seen. She smiled, a little sad. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't left. I nodded. So do I. But you did, she added, and it made space for the rest of us to believe we could too. That afternoon, I reviewed another batch of resumes from former Jennings and Rowe employees. I didn't have to. I could have delegated it, but I wanted to, because I remembered their faces, their efforts, the way we all tried to hold up a system that was never built to hold us. Not everyone made it out. Some disappeared from LinkedIn entirely. Others pivoted to different industries. A few, like Patrice, still hadn't responded to outreach, but I kept a folder of their names. Not because I owed them, but because I understood the cost of staying. At 4 p.m., I got a message from HR. Subject, Darren Wells, application. I stared at it for a long time. He'd applied. For a consulting role. No note, no cover letter. Just a name I knew too well and a resume full of jargon and half-truths. I didn't open it. Just clicked mark as read and closed the tab. There was nothing left to say. The truth was, Darren had already taught me the most important lesson of my career. Not by mentoring me, but by underestimating me. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. That night, as I packed up, I glanced at the framed copy of my original offer letter, the one from Jennings and Rowe. I'd kept it as a reminder of how little they thought I was worth. Next to it, I placed a small card Lexi had given me on my first day as her mentor. Thank you for making space for people like me. I hope I make you proud. She already had. As I turned off the lights in my office, I thought back to that moment, Darren's laughter echoing off the glass walls, his smirk, his dismissal, and how those two sentences, "If you want more money, get a job elsewhere," had pushed me out of one life and into another, a better one. One I built with quiet resolve, hard choices, and an understanding that value is never determined by a title, a manager, or a company. It's something you define for yourself. The real raise wasn't in my paycheck. It was in the respect I finally received, the peace I earned, the future I created. And no one could ever take that away again. I remember the exact moment it happened. I was sitting in that gray cubicle with the flickering fluorescent light overhead, the one I had asked maintenance to fix 6 times, the one that buzzed just enough to keep you on edge, but never loud enough to justify a complaint. That was where I sat for 8 years. Same desk, same chair, same smile plastered on my face, pretending I wasn't waiting for something I knew deep down was never going to come. Then came the email. Subject line, "Let's chat." From Dan Miller, VP of Operations. Time, 3:14 p.m. My heart knew before my brain even finished reading it. Promotion season. The end of quarter 2. The 7th June in a row that I'd thrown everything I had into proving myself. I walked into his office exactly 2 minutes early. Not too eager, not too casual. I wore the navy blazer I saved for important conversations, the one that still smelled faintly of dry cleaner starch. Dan was scrolling on his phone when I walked in. He didn't look up right away, like I was interrupting something more valuable than my future. Then he smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a human smile. One of those, "I hope you don't make this awkward" smiles. "Linda," he said, gesturing to the seat in front of his desk. "Thanks for coming in." I already knew. But I still held on to the tiniest thread of hope. Hope is stubborn like that. It sticks around even after your dignity has left the room. Dan folded his hands. "So, we've completed our internal reviews, and while your performance has been really solid, the leadership team has decided to go in a slightly different direction this cycle." I blinked. "Again?" He leaned back, sighed like this was hard for him. "You're doing great work, Linda. I mean that. Keep trying. Maybe next time." Maybe next time. That was the 13th time Dan, or someone above him, had said some version of those words to me. 13 times I had watched someone else get promoted. 13 times I had smiled and said, "I understand," even when I didn't. I nodded like I had a choice. "Thanks for the feedback," I managed to say. What I didn't say was that I had trained 4 of the people who now had titles above mine. That I had carried entire project teams when their leaders disappeared. That I hadn't taken a real vacation in almost 3 years. I walked back to my desk like I wasn't falling apart inside. That night, I sat in my car in the company parking lot, staring at the dashboard for over an hour. It was raining, of course. It always rains when your heart's breaking and no one's around to notice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there until my fingers stopped shaking. Then I called my younger brother, Marcus. He's an ER nurse, used to seeing pain up close. I told him everything. About the promotion. About Dan. About the way I felt like I was disappearing. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You know what your problem is, Lynn?" I laughed bitterly. "Enlighten me." "You keep showing loyalty to people who wouldn't notice if you dropped dead at your desk. It's like you're trying to win a game where they've hidden the finish line." I didn't say anything. 13 times? He said again, softly. Come on. That night, something shifted in me. Something permanent. I didn't decide to burn the place down. I didn't decide to sabotage anyone. That's not who I am. But I did decide something else. I would never let these people decide my value again. Not Dan. Not the company. Not the leadership team who only remembered my name when they needed something fixed. That was the night I began what I called the quiet exit. Not quitting. Not yet. But beginning the 6-month clock to build my way out instead of begging to be let in. The Monday after rejection, number 13, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. Same blazer, same coffee mug, same half smile as I passed Dan's door and nodded like we were still pretending to be cordial. But everything inside me had shifted, because this time I wasn't hoping to be seen. I was watching them instead. People think revenge is loud, but the most dangerous kind is the kind you never see coming. Mine started with a spreadsheet. I called it my quiet exit tracker. Simple, private, password protected. It had 4 tabs. Tab 1, assets. Everything I had ever built for the company. Templates, process guides, client retention strategies. All the things they took for granted. Tab 2, relationships. Not just internal teams, but clients. Names, contact info, decision makers who liked me, who trusted me, who called me instead of Dan when things got messy. Tab 3, gaps. All the systems I had quietly patched up over the years. Data integrity issues, vendor mishandlings, supply chain hiccups. The places where I was the fix, but no one ever credited me for it. And tab 4, leverage. This one took weeks to build. It was a map of how many systems ran because I made them run. Not because they were well designed, but because I was there, holding the seams together. This wasn't about being petty. It was about being prepared. I gave myself 6 months. That's how long I would keep playing the part. 6 months to quietly build my next chapter while Dan and company, had no idea what was coming. The first month was all about control. I stopped volunteering for every fire drill Dan's favorites created. I smiled, I nodded, I delivered. Without overextending. I began to document every major piece of work I did, but not in their systems. In mine, every solution, every workaround, every client concern I solved. Meanwhile, I updated my portfolio. Not a resume, a portfolio. A record of everything I'd done over the past 8 years that actually mattered. I wasn't applying for another job. I was preparing to build something of my own. I started going for lunch walks. No one noticed. They just assumed I was on client calls. During those walks, I talked to people. Old colleagues who had left the company. Clients who had switched providers. People in the industry who had always told me, "You should be doing this on your own." I never said I was planning anything. I just listened, took notes, collected names. By the end of month 2, I had a network. Not huge, but strong. Quiet conversations over coffee. DMs on LinkedIn. A few lunches where people leaned in and said, "If you ever do go out on your own, let me know." Meanwhile, back at the office, Dan had already forgotten our last conversation. He passed me in the hallway one morning and actually said, "Don't give up, Linda. You've got grit." I just smiled. That same afternoon, he promoted Jason, the guy who took credit for one of my reports 3 months earlier. Number 14. I thought maybe I'd feel something, but I didn't. I just opened my tracker and added one more name to tab 4. People who were rewarded for my work. It was around this time I realized something strange. I was sleeping better. I wasn't obsessing over the next promotion cycle. I wasn't anxiously refreshing my inbox. I wasn't sitting in bed replaying conversations with Dan, wondering what I could have said differently. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just building my exit. It wasn't easy. I'd have moments, brief ones, where I'd start to doubt myself. Where I'd hear that little voice that said, "You're not a leader. You're a safe pair of hands. You're replaceable." But then I'd remember, if I was so replaceable, why did everything fall apart when I was out sick for 3 days last year? Why did clients email me, not Dan, when projects hit the fan? Why did I always end up cleaning up the messes? The only reason I hadn't left yet was because I thought loyalty would eventually earn me a place at the table. Spoiler, it never does. By the end of month 3, I had outlined my business plan. Consulting, niche, specific, high value. I knew where the gaps were in our industry. I knew how many clients were sick of firms like ours. I'd been on the calls. I'd heard the complaints. I wasn't just planning to leave. I was planning to solve a problem that Dan didn't even realize existed. And I wasn't doing it out of bitterness. I was doing it because I deserved better. They just didn't know yet that when I walked out the door, I'd be taking far more than a desk plant and my coffee mug with me. And the best part? They wouldn't even see it coming. By month 4, the office started changing. Not in any dramatic, visible way, but in subtle, almost imperceptible shifts. People started coming to me for answers before going to their actual supervisors. It started with Tara from finance. "Hey, Linda, quick question. Do you remember how we reconciled that vendor invoice loop last quarter? Jason said to wait for IT, but I fixed it in 10 minutes. Quietly. No credit asked. Then it was Sam from legal. Then Rachel from product. Then 3 different project managers from client delivery. It wasn't because I advertised myself as the go-to. It was because everyone knew who would actually get things done. And I made sure to note every single one of those moments in my quiet exit tracker. The dependencies were multiplying, and Dan had no clue. He was too busy planning a leadership offsite for quarter 3. I wasn't invited. Again, not that I expected to be. It was around this time that I also started getting emails from old clients. Soft pings. "Hey, Linda, long time. Can we hop on a quick call?" Or, "I heard you were the brains behind that last rollout. Got time for coffee?" I was careful. Never crossed any lines. I didn't sell anything. Didn't pitch. I just listened. Answered questions. Made myself helpful. Off the record. And here's the part they really didn't see coming. I started saying no. Not rudely. Not even directly. But subtly. Strategically. When Dan asked me to work late for the new onboarding schedule Jason had forgotten to implement, I said, "Happy to help, but I'll need a formal project brief first." When Kirsten, now a newly promoted client liaison, asked me to revise her pitch deck last minute, I replied, "Happy to review, but I have back-to-back deliverables today. Can you send it through official channels?" Translation: I'm not your fallback anymore. For the first time in 8 years, I had boundaries, and the weirdest part? People respected them. Or at least, they learned to adjust around them. By the middle of month 4, I had completed the second phase of my plan, my escape hatch. I registered my LLC, just a shell company on paper for now. LMC Strategies. I hired a freelance designer to create a minimalist logo. I set up a clean, professional landing page. No services listed, no contact info. Just a brand, just presence. To the outside world, it looked like I was preparing for something. But to Paragon, I was still just Linda, the reliable one, the safe pair of hands. Dan even stopped me in the hallway one day and said, "Hey, you've been really solid lately. Keep it up. You never know when the next round of promotions is coming." I didn't even laugh this time. I just looked at him and said, "Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it." The truth is, I wasn't angry anymore. I was past that. What I felt was clarity. I could finally see the system for what it was. A loop. A rigged machine that fed off people like me. Quiet, competent, loyal, while rewarding whoever made the most noise in meetings. I'd spent too many years trying to solve an equation that was never designed to be solvable. But now, I had leverage. Real leverage. And I hadn't even used it yet. Not once. I hadn't threatened to leave. I hadn't hinted at dissatisfaction. I hadn't made a scene or demanded anything. I had simply become essential and documented every thread that ran through me. Meanwhile, back at the office, the cracks were starting to show. Jason missed a vendor renewal deadline that cost the company $18,000. Kirsten submitted a client proposal with 3 incorrect data points and blamed the numbers team. A new junior hire had accidentally wiped a shared database because no one had bothered to onboard her properly. Dan's solution? Another meeting. Another leadership alignment session. Another chance to say vague things like, "We're evolving our org structure to support excellence." And me? I just kept smiling, nodding, solving, while quietly building something better on the side. By the time I hit month 5, my pipeline was real. 3 clients had expressed soft interest in working with me, if I ever decided to go out on my own. 2 of them had already asked for proposals. I hadn't sent them. Yet. Because this wasn't about desperation. This was about power, timing, control. And Dan, bless him, still had no idea. But he would. It started with a missed call from Meridian Systems. Dan didn't notice at first. Neither did Jason, or Kirsten, or anyone else sitting in that sleek glass conference room where people like me were never invited, unless they needed someone to take notes. But I noticed, because Meridian had never called the general support line before. They called me, every time. When I didn't answer that day, not because I was being vindictive, but because I was in a coffee meeting with someone much more important. They left a voicemail, one that made something inside me click. "Hey, Linda, just checking in. Noticed some changes in the reporting dashboard. It's not updating the way you set it up. We're kind of stuck. Can you take a quick look?" They said it casually, but I knew what that meant. They were circling, because when your clients are used to efficiency, any hiccup feels like a full-blown emergency. And I had built the dashboard from scratch. That night, I didn't open my work laptop. Instead, I opened a fresh document on my personal device. Client Transfer Protocol, a step-by-step breakdown of how I would onboard clients from my old life into my new one. Cleanly, ethically, and with airtight boundaries. Still, I wasn't ready to move. Not yet. Because the real impact of absence doesn't come the first time someone can't reach you. It comes the 3rd time, the 4th. The moment when they start wondering if you're gone for good. That moment came 2 weeks later. Heelbridge Technologies had a rollout planned for a Friday. I'd built their entire automation plan. Dan had assigned Jason to shadow me on the account, but Jason had never once joined a single call. Thursday afternoon, I handed over the final handoff notes like I always did. Jason nodded blankly, clearly planning to wing it. Friday morning at 9:12 a.m., my personal phone buzzed. Heelbridge CEO, not a project manager, not an assistant. The CEO. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, an email. Subject, urgent. "Hi, Linda. Not sure if you're on this project anymore, but things are breaking left and right. Jason says you were the architect. Can you please help?" I stared at the screen. I felt nothing. No panic, no guilt, no desperate need to jump in and save them like I always had. Just confirmation. It had started. The very structure they said I wasn't senior enough to be a part of was quietly falling without me. Later that day, Dan messaged me on Slack. "Hey, quick cue. You around to jump on a call, Ari? Heelbridge? Having some snags. Shouldn't take long." Snags, right. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to the tracker. I added 2 columns: calls missed and escalation level. By the end of the week, 9 missed calls from internal teams, 6 emails from clients, 3 Slack messages from Dan, 1 executive escalation directly from Heelbridge. And I still said nothing. I was still employed, still showing up, still smiling during Monday meetings, but I was done saving people who didn't know what they had until it was gone. That Friday, I submitted my resignation letter. No theatrics, no dramatic speech, just a clean, formal email. Dear Dan, after much consideration, I've decided to resign from my position at Paragon, effective 2 weeks from today. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had here. Best, Linda. It took 14 minutes for Dan to call me. I didn't answer. 20 minutes after that, I got the second call. From HR. Still no response. Then came the email from Dan. Linda, can we please talk? Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. We can revisit your promotion track. Let's discuss options. Options? Like I hadn't waited for 13 rounds of options. I didn't reply. Because I already had my options. 3 clients had quietly confirmed their willingness to follow me, each one more fed up with Paragon than the last. And the best part? I had never signed a non-compete. Dan had forgotten, or assumed, but I hadn't. By Monday morning, word had spread. I walked in like any other day, sat at my desk, logged in, acted normal. Dan approached, face tight. We should talk. I looked up calmly. Sure, I have 30 minutes before my next meeting. He was already sweating. Dan shut the door behind him like we were about to have a friendly catch-up. But I could already see it. The cracks behind his customer service grin, the desperation he was trying to suppress. He sat across from me, leaned forward, elbows on knees, like he was trying to be real with me for the first time in 8 years. Linda, he started. Look, I know you're upset. I tilted my head. Upset? He blinked. I mean, about the timing, the promotion situation. I get it. He didn't get it, not even close. I just want to understand, he said. Why now? I almost laughed, but instead I took a deep breath and gave him what he'd never given me: honesty. Because after 13 rejections, I finally realized you're not going to change, I said quietly. And I stopped waiting for you to notice what I've done here. Dan ran a hand through his thinning hair, exhaling. Look, we can fix this. You've been invaluable lately. The leadership team agrees. Let's revisit the promotion. I'm thinking senior consultant. We can fast-track it. That would have worked 2 years ago. Now? It felt insulting. I'm not staying, I said. Dan's face changed like someone had flipped a switch. Panic just barely restrained under politeness. You need to understand, he said, voice tightening. We're in the middle of 3 major rollouts. You're the point of contact for Meridian and Heelbridge. You walk out now, things fall apart. I said nothing. He stared at me like I'd failed to follow the script, like I was supposed to feel guilty. Grateful for the opportunity to be burned out and ignored. We can make it worth your while, he said, his voice softer. 15% raise, senior title, bigger accounts. I met his gaze and said the one thing I'd been holding for years. Dan, you don't get to value me now that I'm walking away. And just like that, the conversation ended. Over the next few days, I watched the walls slowly buckle. The Monday after my resignation, Jason broke a key configuration file for Meridian's rollout. It delayed the project by 10 days and cost Paragon over $70,000 in penalty fees. Heelbridge sent in a formal complaint. Your team is unresponsive, disorganized, and unprepared. Internal systems started glitching. No one could figure out the custom data sync I had manually patched 2 years ago, because no one had ever asked how I'd done it. They just assumed I'd always be around to fix it. Dan started emailing me daily. Can you hop on for just 10 minutes? Where did you save the Heelbridge notes? Clients are asking for you by name. Please advise. Each email was more frantic than the last. By the end of my first week of notice, I had 48 missed calls. I counted them. Dan, human resources, client liaisons, even Kirsten. They were unraveling. Quietly, messily, completely. And me? I was calm, focused. My onboarding process for my new business was almost complete. My new website went live on Thursday. That same day, I received 2 formal inquiries from the clients who had been just curious before. Now they were ready. Paragon didn't even know how deep the shift was yet, but they were about to find out. On day 9 of my notice, I received a meeting invite from Vernon, the company's CEO. Subject: let's talk. Dan was already seated when I entered Vernon's office, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Vernon stood to shake my hand, overly formal. Linda, thank you for coming. I nodded, said nothing. We've been reviewing recent developments, he said. Client feedback, team performance. Frankly, it's been illuminating. Translation: we had no idea how much of this place depended on you until it started breaking. We'd like to make you an offer, he continued. Senior manager, 25% raise, flexible hours, immediate promotion. Dan smiled like this was generous, like I should leap at the chance. I didn't move. Linda, Vernon said, what would it take to keep you here? I met his eyes. Nothing. Silence. Just the hum of the air vent and the ticking of the wall clock. I've already moved on, I said. You just didn't notice. They didn't argue after that, because they knew. They finally knew. When I left the building that evening, I passed Dan in the hallway. He looked up, searching my face for anything. Regret, hesitation, one last shred of uncertainty. I smiled. Good luck. And I meant it, because what was coming next? They weren't ready. The day after I walked out of Paragon for the last time, I sat at my new desk. Not in a cubicle. Not under flickering lights. Not in a building with motivational posters no one believed in. My desk, in my home office. With natural light, actual silence, and a nameplate that finally said what I had always been. Linda Cooper, founder and principal consultant, LMC Strategies. No fanfare. No party. Just peace. And a quiet kind of power that settled into my bones. By noon that day, I had 3 signed contracts sitting in my inbox. Meridian, Heelbridge, and a third I hadn't expected. Allensworth Diagnostics, a company I'd only spoken to once, but who had heard good things. I didn't poach them. I didn't chase. They came to me. They came because they saw something Paragon never had. Someone who solved problems. Someone who listened. Someone who delivered, without asking to be applauded every 5 minutes. Within 3 weeks, I had 5 clients and more revenue than I'd ever made in a quarter at Paragon. Dan, meanwhile, was in damage control mode. I know this because Tara, one of the few people I still spoke to, texted me. They're falling apart without you. Vernon called an all hands to restructure accountability. Translation: he's panicking. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Dan. Linda, listen. I know things didn't end how they should have, but I'd really like to connect. We've had some challenges. I think we should talk. Maybe see if there is any path forward. I didn't call back. Not out of spite, but because I wasn't interested in going backward. That same week, I hired my first contractor, a systems analyst named Priya. Smart, sharp, overlooked at her last job by, as she put it, a manager who loved golf more than work. She reminded me of someone. By month 3, I had a full client roster, a legal retainer, and 2 more contractors onboarding. Paragon, meanwhile, had downsized 2 departments. Then came the call. Block number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. It was Vernon. "Linda," he said, voice strained. "Thank you for picking up." I waited. "I won't waste your time. We're in a tough spot. Since your departure, we've lost 7 key clients. 3 have explicitly stated it was because of the transition. Morale is not good. Systems are breaking, deliverables are late, and Dan is no longer with us." I stayed silent. "We'd like to propose a merger," he continued. "We acquire your firm. You lead strategy, full autonomy. We need your help." It hit me right then. This was the fantasy I'd had so many nights before, back when I still believed the only way to win was to be let in. But now I had something better than their approval. I had self-respect. I had proof that I could succeed without being tolerated, that I didn't need a seat at their table, because I'd built my own. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not interested." There was a long pause. "I understand," Vernon said quietly. Then, before he hung up, "You were always better than we knew. Too late." A few weeks later, I met Kirsten for coffee. She looked exhausted, said she was leaving Paragon too. "They don't know what they're doing," she said. "They pretend everything's fine, but everyone's terrified. Your name's basically banned in meetings." I smiled. Not smug, just satisfied. "You built something," she said, "and I want to be part of it. If you're hiring, I'll send my resume." I nodded. "Let's talk." By month 6, we were a team of 4. Our clients respected us. Our work mattered, and no one had to fight to be seen. Sometimes I still think about that cheap office chair with the stain, about the flickering lights, about the 13 times I was told to wait my turn. And then I look around at what I've built. No corner cutting, no approval seeking, just clarity, purpose, and a quiet, steady kind of freedom. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's watching them realize they never mattered as much as they thought they did. It's knowing that after 13 rejections, I was never really rejected. I was being redirected to something that was mine, to a version of me who doesn't wait to be chosen.